A tree for the wilderness. The following fictional account is based on the events in Numbers 21, verses 4 through 9. Although the author has written about an event, she has also used her story to describe one of God's provisions for the children of Israel, the acacia tree. As you read, look for the reasons that the acacia tree was so useful to the Israelites on their journey in the wilderness. The author also uses her story to foreshadow another provision that God made for His people, the provision of His Son for a sacrifice.
Rachel loved to watch her father's fingers as they flew back and forth across the loom. Back and forth, up and down, in and out, up and down. The red and blue and purple threads grew into shapes of robed angels for the tent. She tapped her foot. It almost made her feel like singing. Her poor brother Obed was struggling nearby on a smaller loom. His hands were all tangled up in the strings. She knew that someday Obed's work would be as beautiful as her father's, for all the men in their family had always been weavers, even when they lived in Egypt. But right now she liked to tease him. "I sure wish I were a boy. My loom wouldn't look like that." She knew as soon as she saw the frown on her father's face that she shouldn't have said that. Her father leaned over and quickly found the end of the string that would untangle poor Obed's loom. "There, Obed. I think I see what your problem is. Rachel, I am sure you have something to do other than stand around and watch your brother and me. Why don't you go and find some acacia wood for your mother's supper fire?" He handed her a knife from his belt. "Here, don't cut yourself." That ended Rachel's happy weaving song. She was back in the wilderness, and all she could hear was the sad, sad song of the long, long journey. As she turned away, she tried to hide the frown on her face. Her foot came down harder with each step. She passed the rows and rows of tents, all belonging to the family of Judah. She kicked a stone angrily. Why couldn't each family choose a spot of their own to set up their tent? Unless you counted the tents carefully, you would end up eating supper with someone else's family. But then it wouldn't make any difference. Everyone would be eating the same thing. Manna. There wasn't anything else to eat. That plain white manna on the ground every morning. No matter how her mother fixed it, it tasted the same every day. She comforted herself in knowing that she wasn't the only one to be tired of the manna. She had heard people talk about the watermelons back in Egypt. They said they were so sweet and juicy. She probably would never get to taste one. They'd been walking around in the wilderness so long. When were they going to get to the place where they could live in a house and eat food grown in a garden? As she looked up, she saw something that made her walk faster. It was the tent. It always stood in the middle of the camp. The cloud covered one end of it when they weren't traveling. All the rest was covered with a big, black-skinned blanket. It seemed like a big black eye that watched her everywhere she went. They said it was beautiful on the inside, furniture made of acacia wood covered with gold. But because she was a girl, she could only listen to what her brother and father had told her. Even they hadn't been in the inner rooms. Only the family of Levi could go there. She shivered, and then that old angry feeling came back. Why did the Lord allow them to wander in the wilderness? Did He want them to be unhappy? Suddenly, she remembered what she was supposed to be doing. She imagined herself weaving a beautiful piece of cloth on the loom. Instead, she was hunting for firewood. By now, she was outside the camp. There were acacia trees everywhere. Blossoms covered the trees like fluffy yellow clouds, but they looked more like puffs of smoke to Rachel. She hurried toward a small one. It wouldn't be so hard to cut the branches from this one. Or perhaps the woodcutters had left some on the ground. It was hard to cut the branches from between the thorns on the leaves. A couple of goats had already claimed this tree for their own. They seemed to love nibbling on the thorny leaves. "Get out of here, you lazy creature! You're standing on the piece I need!" She threatened the goat by pretending to kick it. Just then, he moved, and Rachel's foot kicked the tree instead. As she sat down holding her foot, she heard a voice. "What's wrong?" Around the other side of the tree came a girl who almost made Rachel forget her sore toe. She was very thin, and one leg seemed to be shorter than the other. She was a cripple. She hobbled toward Rachel, leaning on a crutch. "Oh, you hurt your foot. I'm sorry. That wood is hard." "That's the truth. But at least we don't have to worry about bugs when we pick up the wood. It's so hard no bug could dig his teeth into it." "I don't mind the bugs as much as trying to cut this hard old stuff. But the wood from the acacia seems to burn forever. On cold nights, we don't need to keep putting more sticks on the fire. I don't mind the smoke that always gets in my eyes when I sleep near enough to keep warm. I wonder if this silly girl on the crutch had any sense at all. Couldn't she see any of their difficulties? And her being crippled, too. But the acacia wood smoke smells so good. Something like the incense when the priest prays before the holy place. I wouldn't know. I've never been in the holy place."
No, neither have I. But I can think that this acacia tree that I touch every day has been made into furniture for the tent, and it makes Jehovah seem very near. The girl touched the limb of the acacia. A light came into her eyes as she spoke. She looked earnest and sure of what she said. Rachel couldn't understand this feeling. It made her uncomfortable. "What are you doing out here walking under the acacia trees anyway?" Rachel asked. "I'm watching the sheep. Look at their thick, beautiful coats. Won't they make lovely coverings for the tent?" The girl picked up one of the small lambs as she spoke. Rachel wished the girl would stop talking about the tent, and why did she feel it was such a friendly place? Rachel wanted to say something to show her how miserable they were. "Some of the lambs will be used for sacrifice." She pointed at the lamb resting in the girl's arms. The girl sighed. "Yes, I know, but Jehovah has chosen them to remind us that He will take our sin away." Rachel knew the girl was right, but she would rather not be reminded of her sin. Rachel reached up to cut off a branch from the acacia tree, but her knife fell out of her hand with a clatter. Curled around the limb of the tree was an ugly orange snake. "He almost bit me!" Rachel screamed, jumping back. Then, as she turned quickly to run to the safety of the camp, she remembered that the girl was crippled. "Come on! You'll get bitten!" The girl seemed not to hear. She was gathering her frightened sheep, scattered in all directions. Rachel thought, "I'd better help her. She'll never get all those scared sheep to come." But the ugly snake was still staring fixedly at Rachel. It looked like a hot, burning fire. She gave up in fear and ran frantically toward the camp. When Rachel had almost reached the tents, she stopped to catch her breath. There was a strange noise coming from the camp, loud crying, as though something terrible had happened. But she didn't have time to wonder what it was, for right on the path in front of her was a whole nest of bright orange snakes just like the one she had seen in the acacia tree. Heads swaying, they turned toward her. Perhaps if she went in the back of the tents, there wouldn't be any snakes there. She walked slowly around toward the back, trying to stay calm. If she only got back to her family, she would be safe. She thought, but even as she walked carefully along, those bugly orange heads appeared around her as the snakes slithered closer. At last her nerve broke, and she ran for her tent. The snakes seemed more numerous now. In panic, she leapt over them, stumbling and running frantically as she saw that they were crowding the path behind and before her. At last, she saw her tent, but just as she reached the entrance, an orange head shot out from the dust of the doorway. She jerked back, her teeth clamped together, but felt pinpricks of fire shoot through her leg and sudden flames of pain from the poison. She called, "Papa! Papa!" She spun for a moment, and then everything turned dark. When she opened her eyes, she saw her father's face as though he were far away at the end of a dim cave. She heard him saying, "Look, look, Rachel, look up at the snake on the pole." He had carried her back outside into the glaring light. She blinked her dry eyes.
Weakness and fever washed over her. A snake was the last thing she wanted to look at. She turned her head away. "It's the only way, Rachel. Jehovah has promised that you will be healed if you look. Please, look up." She started to sit up, but she could not. She thought her head would burst. It ached so, and her leg felt as though it was weighed down with flaming rocks. She could feel nothing else, only pain. "No, Rachel, please, do it God's way. Please, look up, Rachel, please." His words pleading with her stung her conscience. She woke up a little more. She had been selfish, cruel even, and now somehow she sensed that she would die for it and deserved to die. In that same earnestness, Father was like the crippled girl. He was gently lifting her head. "Look, look, daughter, don't despair of his forgiveness. Don't be condemned forever." Suddenly, she knew. She had always wanted to do things her way. Now there was nothing she could do but do it the way God wanted her to do it. She saw through blurry and fading eyesight an orange acacia pole with an ugly snake made of brass curled around it. It was horrible, but then she understood it. Horrible like the slaying of the lambs. Like them, it meant something, a forgiveness, a taking away of sin. It was a symbol of death itself, another's death, not hers. In one instant, she understood her own rebellion and the incredible forgiveness that God was giving her. It was as the prophet said, that God would bear man's sin and conquer it forever. The whole story of Jehovah's redemptions was on that pole. And then she was weary. But the pain stopped. Her father carried her inside to look at her wound, and she sat up. Her leg looked just like it always had, except for the 2 small fang marks that would always remind her of what had happened that day. Rachel fell asleep while her father looked at her leg. After she rested, her mother brought her some manna cooked in goat's milk. It was soft and warm all the way through, and the milk felt good on her dry throat. "Thank you," Rachel said. Her mother smiled and helped Rachel sit up to eat it. For a moment her mother said nothing, and Rachel sensed how frightened she had been during her brush with death. Why had Rachel been so ungrateful and tormented everybody so? With a pang of guilt, she thought of the crippled girl whose feelings she had wanted to hurt so badly that afternoon. Have I changed so much from this afternoon, or am I still the same person? "Look," her mother said, "the cloud has turned to fire." And Rachel looked out at the tent with the shiny brass snake still hanging from the acacia pole. The acacia pole had been thrust up near the front entrance. She knew then that she had really been changed. Somehow, the tent no longer seemed like something to avoid. Rachel knew and believed Jehovah and his promise of redemption. Rachel looked back at the tent, and there was her friend from the acacia tree. She had something in her arms. Of course, it was a lamb. So Jehovah had saved her from the snake. Rachel had to tell her. Tomorrow she would go to the acacia trees where the herds grazed and find her friend. She would find a way to tell the crippled girl what Jehovah had done for her. His way seemed good now. At last she understood that his way was the way of redemption.